The opinions and views expressed on this program do not reflect those of the management or staff of Community Media of Staten Island. Well, hello everyone, Dave Frankel, and we're ready now to go for another program. And this time, I'm going to tell you something. We're lucky to have a former Staten Islander who I knew when we were little kids. I was his coach, basketball coach, and he was younger than I am. But still, I coached him, and he knew more. The only time I ever coached a team where the basketball player, which was Harvey, knew more about basketball than I would ever know in my lifetime. So I used him as the coach. Timeout. What do you think we should do now, Harvey? Well, I mean, it was that was the feeling I needed to have that, because I know the game, but not like you knew it, because you played every single moment of your life. By the way, this is Harvey Araton, who has been a newspaper writer and author of a book. We're going to talk about his newest and latest book, and it should be a lot of fun for the next half hour. Okay, now.
Well, the only time we weren't talking, you weren't asking me about what play to call and all that stuff, was when you were telling me to actually get back on defense.
Because
I was mostly interested in putting up shots.
Oh, good.
That was the result of my growing up in the West Brighton houses.
Right.
And we had those basketball courts right on Henderson Avenue, and that was I always called it our oasis of recreation.
Isn't that something?
And we none of us had any, families didn't have money. We weren't going to fancy camps and things like that, but we had those basketball courts. So basketball was in my blood from a very young age. And then, of course, when I was about 12, I think I gravitated to the Jewish Community Center, the old one on Victory Boulevard.
Oh, and boy, that was a good one.
What memories we created there,
I
right?
remember that, yeah. We had I remember it as it was called the Biddy Basketball League. This is for the really young, I was 8, 10, 9, 8, whatever the hell it was. And it was every Sunday, and then during the week there were leagues that were maybe a couple of years older. There was basketball almost every single night, and the court was not a regulation court. It was a small little nothing, but we played, and that was fantastic. We looked forward to it.
Yeah, the only detriment to that was that when we finally reached a point, like if you tried out for a high school team,
yes,
and I went to Port Richmond High School, and you actually wound up on a regulation court, you're out of breath after 2 times up and down.
You are so correct.
But it was a lovely place to grow up.
Right.
The great Mel Selznick was the sports director.
He was.
And for me, my family really didn't have a lot of money to pay the membership dues and everything. I'd always show up and I'd kind of look hesitatingly at Mel, and he would just say, "Go get dressed."
Yeah,
it was a really welcoming place.
Not only that, I can follow through with Mel. That's the way he was as a principal of a school. I worked with him at IS 27. He was just terrific with the kids, the best you could be. He was tough with them, but also very, very supportive. And I picked up a lot of stuff from him. So that's great that you mentioned his name. Okay, so here we go. I know you started with the Daily News.
No, I actually started with the Advance.
Oh, I should have known that.
Right out of high school.
I know.
I was 18 years old, and I made, I had the most important job on the newspaper, which was making deli runs and picking up AP photos in Manhattan. I had an old beat-up car that I would drive in on Saturday late afternoon for the Sunday edition. And that really got me started on a long career in sports journalism. From there, I went to the Post, where my first beat was the New York Knicks, and I traveled around with them for several years. Then I went to the Daily News, did more of that, became a general sports columnist. And then in 1991, I went to the New York Times, where I spent 25 years writing the Sports of the Times column, which means that I covered, sports across the board. I covered Olympics. Fortunate enough, on somebody else's dime to travel all over the world, whether it was the Olympics or tennis. I feel like I was blessed. Had a career in life that, growing up in the West Brighton houses, I don't think I ever dreamed of having. And I've also been fortunate enough to write 10 books
That's terrific.
And the latest one is my
We're going to talk about
first one about for kids, basically.
Yeah, good. And it's a novel.
Yeah, it's a novel. It's can I give you a little bit of the background about why I wrote it?
No, because you're not here. Of course you can.
So you'll probably remember in 2001, right before 9/11. So the story was sensational until 9/11 happened, and then it kind of disappeared. The Little League scandal with the Bronx kid Danny Almonte.
Oh, I remember that.
Right,
Sure.
and he, it turned out he was like 35 years old pitching in the Little League World Series. And, they had to forfeit. It was a Bronx team. They had to forfeit all their games. Well, a year later, when the series came up again, I realized, you'll remember when we were kids, Dave, that Wide World of Sports used to always show the Little League championship game.
Absolutely.
And if you were a Staten Island kid, you remember very well of a certain age that the Mid-Island Little League,
did very well.
Won the world championship over Monterrey, Mexico. And a kid that I actually went to high school with at Port Richmond, Danny Yacarino, came within one strike of a perfect game.
I remember that.
So,
Thank you for bringing that back, because I can't. Yeah.
So the Little League World Series was always something I paid attention to.
too.
But by 2000, they always show the championship game on Wide World of Sports, and that was it. It was a novelty thing. By 2002, which was a year after the Almonte scandal, ESPN was televising every game. And so I wrote a column essentially posing the question, not judgmentally, just posing the question, are we celebrating kids or are we exploiting them now for network profit? And, I back then when I raised that question, I had no idea of how much of a business youth sports would become. Last summer, the New York Times reported on its front page that youth sports in the United States now is a $40 billion industry that is now being taken over by private equity companies. They're investing.
I never knew that.
Mega sums, yeah. And so what's happening is that these guys are smart businessmen. They're not getting into the business for the well-being necessarily of children. They're in it to make money.
Absolutely.
And they're investing huge sums to build facilities, but they want the return. So a lot of young parents with kids of a certain age are essentially being pressured now to get on board. If you want your kid to someday be a high school athlete or get a Division I scholarship or even beyond, you got to start getting them into these top programs and clinics and mentoring from very young ages. And it's pressuring people. Nobody wants to deprive their child. We all love our kids and stuff, and you don't want to be that parent that said, "Oh, if I would have put him in, maybe he or she would have done something." So people are, more willing to stretch or break their family budgets so their kids don't get left behind, and that in turn puts a lot of pressure on youngest kids. And so I wrote this book. I created a story, and it's targeted to what we call middle grade readers. 8 to 12, give or take, to try to reinforce what's really important about participating in youth sports at those ages. I'm not against, places for elite athletes. I've covered elite athletes from, Larry Bird to Michael Jordan to Roger Federer to Derek Jeter, my entire career. They're awesome, right? But kids of those young ages don't need to hear the noise about college scholarships. It puts too much pressure on them. So this story that I wrote is really designed to remind kids of that age and parents who I would love for them to read this book with their kids about the truly foundational aspects of playing a youth sport. And those are the things like learning how to be a coachable kid, learning how to be a good teammate, learning how to win with grace and lose with grace.
Terrific.
Learning to compete with kids from all different walks of life. Those are the things that we really want to reinforce, because youth sports at those ages, right, should be more about life skills, developing life skills more than building a bridge to a Division I college scholarship. At some point, a kid gets to be 11, 12, 13. The truly gifted and driven kids, they will show themselves, right? Yep. And then, of course, you want to nurture those those abilities, just as we'd want to nurture the talent of a young musician or artist or mathematician, right? But the temptation, because so many millions of kids play sports, it's a it takes trouble saying the word, statistical improbability at best that your kid at 8 who is scoring a bunch of goals, on the soccer field, and this is a soccer-centric book, but I think it applies to all team sports. It's highly improbable that kid is going to get a college scholarship. I think it's less than 2% of kids who play youth sports. And the other important statistic that I think parents need to remember, Dave, is that between 65 and 70% of kids, boys and girls, who start a sport at those tender young ages of 6, 7, 8, by the time they are 12 or 13, have quit.
Yeah, that I know. I've seen that.
Yeah, they burn out, feel too much pressure. And I think this evolution into highly competitive but also highly costly youth sports is a contributing factor. So I wrote this book, and where did I situate the story? On Staten Island.
Yay.
Because this is where I grew up.
Yeah.
I loved growing up and playing sports, whether it was at the JCC, whether it was in a CYO league, or just whether it was on those basketball courts in West Brighton, just playing with my friends, which, of course, I think those of us of a certain age have our fondest memories of just us,
That's it.
without parent supervision.
They were working. They
They were
time.
busy. We had a few scraps on the courts or on the in the playgrounds, but we figured it out ourselves. And
That's right.
Kids don't really do that as much anymore.
Well said. That's true. And the biggest thrill was when I could play on a court with a net. It was just to play with the ring, not the net. If you had a net, that was big time. That was exciting.
We had chain links in the project.
I remember that.
Yeah.
At least you had something.
Yeah.
Well, it's well stated. It's true. I just want to bring this up. I don't mean to be negative, but in the Staten Island Advance, and actually it was on the air. Was it on TV? No. It was in the Staten Island Advance. The CYO ran into some problems with a very real issue that I've seen so many times, where parents at a basketball game, the mother went crazy and screamed and yelled, and there was a fist fight I remember years gone by, this has happened a lot, but this was the latest one. So bad that the borough president decided to come up with some ruling at this. I hate to bring the CYO because they're a wonderful organization. I played a couple of games with them. They decided that if someone, a mother, father, someone in the family is unruly, they're suspended for 1 year. If they do it again, they're suspended from the CYO. It got to be that bad.
I did see the story. I think somebody posted something on
Yeah.
Facebook with a video.
Yeah. Oh,
I think it was
video.
it was sixth grade basketball game, boys basketball game.
So you saw the video.
So I saw it. Yeah, and this is unfortunately more common than we think. Not just here, but everywhere. I mean, I live in Montclair, New Jersey, and the thing about youth sports is that it's in a community. It's highly visible. I've been saying that if you have a kid who's a mathematical genius, the chances are the only people who are going to know about it are the kids in his or her class, right? In sports, if you have a young athlete who's, hitting 400 or, is the high scorer on the basketball team or the leading scorer on the soccer team, it's out front. It's so visible. And it brings out such emotion. I understand parents have a lot of pride.
Oh, yeah.
I raised 2 kids. They both played soccer. They're from town rec league to travel team to high school. My younger son played high school basketball. I could admit that there were more than a few moments I wish I could do over as a parent, losing my cool, yelling at an official who was probably 16 years old when, something like that. yelling at a parent on the opposite team, or the opponents who were yelling that my kid, who was small but feisty, my younger son, that was getting into the chest, calling him a dirty player. And I'm like, he's like a midget out there. You know,
Yeah.
what are you yelling at him for? But it brings out that raw emotion. But that's where perspective has to be brought back into it, that, you know, let the kids breathe, let the kids figure it out for themselves. This story, by the way, I should mention the name of the book. I'm not the greatest self-promoter, but the name of the book is The Goal of the Game.
Yep.
The story is about a kid who wakes up, he's 12 years old and wakes up on the first day of his fall season. And his team has gone from being pathetic to a very advanced, nationally ranked team. But he's had some family trauma in his life. And he suddenly looks around on the field during the practices that fall before the season starts, and he sees all strange kids because this team has become a regional team. We call them select teams, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not the kids from his community. And his community is based, it's like in the neighborhood right above Forest Avenue, Davis Avenue, that area. And so he's looking around and he sees strangers. You know, they're all good players, but he doesn't see his friends. And he's at a point in his life where he needs the emotional support of kids who know what he's gone through in his family trauma. Mm-hmm. And so he wakes up on that morning and he doesn't want to play anymore. And he goes down and he tells his mother, who's a very high energy, you know, she's like the parent manager. And he just quits, right? After these several years of, you know, advancing and climbing the ladder. And he just quits. And then the book goes back in time to his earliest years playing soccer, year by year, as the team advances, right? And he's playing with his friends, and until it brings us back to the point where he quits. And that sets up the conclusion of the story,
Gotcha.
Which is I probably worked longer and harder on the concluding chapters than I did on the rest of the book combined.
I could see that happening with any type of author.
Yeah, because I wanted kids playing whatever team sport they're playing,
right,
at whatever level. I wanted them to put the book down and be reminded of the reasons or the idealistic reasons that we want kids to play sports. So I worked really hard on the ending. I won't give it away.
Don't, please.
But, you know, I hope that kids and their parents will read the book, you know, put it down with a smile on their face and a reminder of the true beauty of what youth sports is. There will be kids who go on and win those scholarships and stuff, but they are the very small minority. The rest of the kids play for the love of it.
And that is parent-driven sometimes. The
of course,
parents,
yeah.
obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
And the kid might not be ready for that. It's like the readiness factor in anything. And the parents want it more than the kid. I mean, you had mentioned that somewhere along the way, but I've seen that become out of hand.
Yeah,
and the kid suffers for it.
People have asked me, you know, in some of the talks I've given about the book, what would you advise parents to do? And I said, well, let your child be the guide to the extent of your commitment, not only time-wise but financially, right? There's a young woman I know from my town who was like a great young soccer player, mm-hmm. and I used to see her around the corner kicking a ball with her sister, rain, snow, whatever. And then we moved to another part of town, and the next thing I knew, she was playing on the University of North Carolina NCAA championship team. Now she's the president and general manager of the New York Gotham, the women's professional league over in Jersey.
Oh, that's something.
But I remember when she was in college and she played on that national title team, I interviewed her mom and I said, how did you know she was sacrificing playing on the school team? And, you know, she really had to give up a lot. I said, how'd you know that the sacrifices she was making would be worth it? And she said, well, of course you never know. She said, but the hint or the evidence that we got as a family was that never once did we have to yell upstairs, get down here, you'll be late for practice. She was the one yelling at us, get down here, I'll be late for practice. And that's how you know. And then, of course, combined with the skills.
Yes.
But if you see a child with the drive, you can't you can't just create an elite athlete with cash. I think that's the bottom line on the whole thing. Yeah.
And we played. I don't want to. We can mention names. This does go all over the place if you wanted to, the show. But Bobby Perline. Mm-hmm. Can I mention that? Mm-hmm. You remember him?
Sure, I do. Yeah.
I played with him 1 year at the JCC, and he was just a natural. And he wanted me to score points, so he would shove me pass the ball to me. He didn't say much. I went to college. I went to high school with him. He was at Curtis with me. And I said to him, you're doing that? You don't have to do that. He said, why not? You're my teammate. He was a terrific guy. I just mentioned that. You know him, mm-hmm. I think.
Yeah.
And Staten Islanders might know him. But he was a great ball player.
We've had some wonderful athletes come out of Staten Island,
right.
And
I know you interviewed some of them and actually played with some of them.
Yeah.
You can mention their names. It's a Staten Island program.
Well, I like I said, I grew up in the West Brighton houses, and we had some kids who went on to be, really good high school players on the island. Larry Cubis and
oh my gosh,
people like that. I just did a podcast a few weeks ago with John Tobin, who played at St. Peter's and has gone on to a career in coaching.
Where is he coaching now?
Out west in Arizona. And so, the other thing to keep in mind is that, we sometimes we will have a kid who's absolutely head and shoulders above everyone else, whether it's on Staten Island or in my town, Montclair, or the neighboring towns, and we think this kid's destined for superstardom. But it's a big world out there, and the kid who's the top player, in your little pond, may be just an average player, out in the greater community.
You know where we saw that? Where I saw that was with baseball on Staten Island. Some of the guys, Sonny Roberto, grew up in the area that you grew up in, West Brighton. Our 1963 team or 62 team was unbelievable for a baseball team, a high school baseball team. And there were at least 3 or 4 players that I went to school with who had tryouts with Major League Baseball, and they did okay. They went to A's, double A's. By the time they were ready to go, Terry Crowley, perfect Baltimore Orioles for and off for I don't know how many years. Yeah,
the other kid that comes to mind is the kid I mentioned earlier, Danny Accarino, who I went to high school with. Years later, when I was working for, I believe, the Daily News, or maybe it was the Times, I can't remember, I wound up revisiting Danny. I think it was right around the Almonte story before the scandal broke.
Right.
And, he was, and Danny was living in Florida. And he talked about how, the kid who pitched the near perfect game as a 12-year-old in the Little League World Series against Monterrey, Mexico, wound up being signed by the Baltimore Orioles organization.
Didn't know that.
And he said, but he used to get a lot of bench jockeying. Oh, there's Mr. Perfect, that kind of stuff, or near perfect. And he said that it really made life difficult for him to have that kind of success at such a young age, and the exposure that came with it, because that team was, celebrated in New York City. And he said that, he always fought the feelings throughout his minor league career and then finished it. I think he had arm injuries as well, that he had failed. And what a terrible thing for a kid who had a wonderful career and reached the minor leagues of baseball. But again, when we apply too much pressure on kids who are still developing human beings, that's why I say, when parents think that if they invest the money at these young ages, right, and that the payoff will come, especially now, not only a college scholarship, but now with the name, image, and likeness, money that's floating around college sports, they think, well, invest the money now, we'll make it up, we'll make more than this, on the back end. Your child is not a stock. It's not. He's not. He or she is. They're not investments.
That's right.
They are developing human beings, and we always have to keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about the soccer craze. It started, what, 10 years ago? Soccer was always there, but it's become now. Now it's become a choice for kids rather than playing football, basketball, baseball.
I think more and more American kids and their families recognize that the earliest game that a kid can really participate in is soccer. I mean, every kid can kick a ball pretty much. Mm-hmm. Kids at 5 and 6 and 7, connecting with a baseball bat and a ball being pitched at them. Basketball, they can't reach, very high with a hoop. Football, probably too dangerous at that age. So soccer's become this grassroots participatory sport for boys and girls. And then, the changes in the world, the connectivity of, satellite TV and I just got back from London.
Yeah, you were
My
right.
wife and I are, over the last few years, have become big Liverpool fans in the English Premier League.
Wow.
And we went to London and then took a train up to Liverpool to go to a game. And it's an incredible experience. For me, it's like a new toy after all the years of covering mainstream American sports, to be following English Premier League, learning a lot about the history of the sport. And the other thing I like about it is that when they say the game is starting at 10 a.m., they kick right off, and it's over by noon. There's none of this 3.5, 4 hour stuff. But kids, I think the sport is growing in popularity. Obviously, U.S. is a melting pot of immigrants, and so people follow their home countries. Our national teams, the World Cup is coming, next summer.
That's going to be great.
Yeah, it is a fast growth. I would say that it's one of it's replaced hockey as the fourth biggest sport when you take everything MLS, international.
I would have to agree with that.
Yeah.
You can tell.
Yeah.
Listen, I just want to, we don't have much time, but I just want to, once again, goal of the game.
The goal of the game, yeah.
Talk about it. It's available
everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the usual places.
And while I have you here for the next few seconds, there are 4 other books at least, that those readers can get their hands on. The one about Yogi Berra, we talked about that.
Yeah, that's called Driving Mr. Yogi.
That was a great story.
I was fortunate enough to get to know the Berra family quite well.
Yeah.
Yogi lived in Montclair, where I live.
Right.
And I just stumbled upon, there's a museum, the Yogi Berra Museum and Learning Center on the campus of Montclair State University. And I just stumbled upon this relationship that he had with Ron Guidry, who in Yogi's late last years, he would go to spring training. It was his ritual, and Guidry would literally take care of him. And it was
babysitting.
Yeah, it was a heartwarming story and a privilege for me to tell.
I think it was great. I loved reading it. And also I read the New York Knicks thing, which is called
When the Garden Was Eden.
Yeah, that's all over the place.
Which, that book is interesting because as the Knicks have gotten good again, although they're currently on a bad losing streak, in these last few playoff years, a lot of new young Knicks fans are being created. And then they go to their parents or they go online and they say, I want to read more about the history of the team. And the sales of that book have really picked up, even though it came out in 2011. It helps that the Knicks never win the championship.
That's right.
So that people want to read about the only 2 championships in the history of the franchise.
Isn't that something? I have to thank you a million times. It was wonderful. Great program, because it's all about a person I know and a person who's a Staten Islander, and just in general, the concept, the idea is helping kids and helping parents, and it's terrific. And I thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dave. It's been a pleasure, and I so much appreciate the opportunity to come, not only see you and reconnect, but also to talk about the book.
Thank you. And that's going to do it. But thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.